It is time once again for the Scramble podcast in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I am Paul Hollingsworth alongside my broadcast and podcast partner, Chris Flynn, who is a three-time Heck Crichton Award winner and a member of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, among other things that he's done in his life. And we are joined this week by Liam Maguire. Liam, thanks for joining us.
Boys, it's a real pleasure. Got to say, especially with Chris, because we haven't talked in 39 years.
Amazing.
That's awesome. You tell me if I got this right, Liam. Hockey nut, journalist, author, historian, trivia wizard, passionate about the game, and basically committed to learning and sharing information about hockey at all times. Do I have that pretty much down pat?
Yeah, man, you nailed it. That's about as well as you can possibly state it right there.
Well, listen, your past with Chris goes back 30, 40 years. Tell us a bit about it. Chris, I'll let you two sort of bounce off each other, but Liam, you started off, you covered him as a journalist way back when. Is that a fair way to start this?
Yeah, well, what happened was Lowell Green, longtime radio broadcaster in Ottawa, decided that because the Ottawa Journal had folded, that the Ottawa Citizen needed some competition, and he thought he'd start a paper. He didn't have the wherewithal to get it going as a daily right away, so he started a weekly, and he called it the Sunday Herald. And I was fresh out of college in Toronto, radio and television broadcasting, and I had taken a minor in broadcast journalism, not really writing per se, but so I don't know. I read the piece today, actually, Chris, I got to be honest, and I kind of cringed a little bit. I'm not too happy with some of my sentence structure, but geez, man, I just can't believe it. You and I just connected on Facebook a few days ago, and I remember our assignment editor gave me the assignment to go to Film and Write and interview this hotshot quarterback. His name was Bishop. His last name was Bishop. This guy was like Oscar Madison from The Odd Couple. He had a 26er that he used to keep in the bottom drawer of his desk.
Jeez.
He'd have a shot at 10 in the morning. Didn't matter. He just slug it right out of the bottle like John Wayne walking in the saloon. He's a big man too. And he died, kind of gruff voice. Go over and interview this kid and film him right. He's just throwing dimes, man. He's throwing dimes. And so I went over and I met Chris and met the coach, I believe, Mr. Power.
He was one of the coaches, but Mr. Fisher was our head
Mr.
coach.
Fisher.
Yeah.
Mr. Fisher.
Dave Fisher.
And met Chris and did the story. And that's the first story I was ever paid to write. And I wrote it on Chris Flynn. And here we are now on a podcast with yourself. And I just think it's the greatest thing in the world.
That's crazy.
You mentioned this, Liam, and I'll just jump in on this. Like, I've been on television now for 28 years. I'll go back and look at some of my early stuff, and I thought I was so good, and I was not. So you look back at the early stuff you've done, and you couldn't wait to show your parents and your friends, and things were going so well, and I cringe at some of my early stuff. But it's proud, and I know you share this probably the same thought. It's prideful to look back and see those starting points, and it sort of brings you on the trajectory to where you are now.
Well, I obviously it wouldn't have mattered who it was, but the fact it's Chris, given what he did, certainly just adds I don't know if validity is the right word, but it certainly puts a lot of more notoriety to it, I suppose, because, I kind of morphed away from writing, although then I've written 4 books. So I kind of got back into it from an author point of view. And I did later, when the Ottawa Sun was going in the mid-90s, I was hired as a full-time sports writer for them for a couple of years. So I wrote a column 3 times a week. So I later kind of morphed into it a little bit more when at 84, it was just a mere junket, really. Just go out, earn a couple bucks, get your feet wet. I was out of college. I was really trying to get into radio. And this opportunity came along because Lowell Green, who had a show on radio, invited me on, and I would go on and they would pay me $75 to do 2 hours. And I would take questions from callers, NHL trivia questions for 2 hours, and they would pay me $75. And then that's why he thought I'd make a good sports writer. I don't know, man. I don't know if one necessarily is the other, but and they sent me over to Film and Write, and I interviewed Chris Flynn. So there you go.
Well, just to let you know, first of all, we were on the Quebec side, so we didn't have a lot of, of the Ottawa papers or the Citizen writing about us. And I told you I lost my high school scrapbook, and I did. But that was so unique that it was from Ottawa, an Ottawa newspaper coming to write about us, that I actually I think my mom or dad framed it, and that's how I found it. It wasn't in the scrapbook; it was framed. So obviously, you did a pretty good job on it because we we framed it. And just in that article, I just want to mention a few things about that high school time before we move on. First of all, you mentioned in the article that we were 26-0 and we hadn't lost yet during my time there. And literally, you know how it goes. Literally, the next week we lost. We lost our first game right after you wrote that article. That's usually how it works. We lost to a very good Laurentian high school team, and then we ended up meeting them in the Ottawa board finals. We ended up beating them in the playoffs there, and then we beat JS Woodsworth in the Ottawa Carleton City Championship. And
yeah,
what was rewarding about that year was the Citizen, I forget what writer it was, but because we were the new team, they predicted us to finish in last place, and we ended up winning the whole thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I just want to mention too, the guy who connected us, Steve McLaughlin. So I played football with his cousin Troy, one of my best buddies, and you mentioned him in the article too as one of my top receivers. So I just want a little shout out, like during those days, like you're from the Ottawa Valley, I'm from Buckingham, Troy's from up in Venosta, his brothers Chris, Dean, and Greg, and Dwight and Colleen, all those gangs. I've been up to Venosta many times playing hockey on the outdoor rinks and playing like street hockey and stuff like that. I've been up to the Venosta hotel with those guys a few times. And as just saying, as we mentioned off air, I'd love to have you guys, you and the McLaughlin crew and Steve, I know is your good buddy, into my Shenanigans bar here one day to talk some hockey there one of these days.
God, I would love that, Chris. And we have, and Steve, as I told you just off here, we talk all the time. He's a very dear friend of mine. His late mother, Lorraine, his dad, Ira, we call Steve Ira, but his dad is the original and is still with us, thank God. And they're just a fantastic family. He's a dear friend. I think he's one of the greatest all-around athletes in my timeline in this area for a number of different sports that he excelled at. And sports brings us all together. Certainly, in my group grew up hardcore sports fans, and hockey, football, fastball primarily, and it's a great link to have, and to hook up with you now. And this has all happened so fast. I remember going over there. I remember shaking your hand. I can vividly picture seeing you and talking to you that day. I remember it clearly, and it was 39 years ago, and it's just amazing.
And that was a football assignment. Obviously, you're a big hockey guy, but you had a little bit of football background yourself, or
not as a player, but I certainly, as a sports fan, how to working enough knowledge for old man Bishop to send me over between chugs.
That's funny.
Get over there. Kid's, I still remember him vividly in downstairs. Our office was down off of Wellington Street there, just a little dungeon almost of a place that Lola, I guess, was renting or leasing, and we were all jammed in there. It was a scene right out of a movie. Got the old typewriters going. You hear the coffee thing going, people drinking coffee that's 4 hours old and stuff. He's got the 26er in his bottom drawer, pulling it out. The only thing missing was a cork coming out of the top of it. And he had the gruff voice, "Get over there. That kid's throwing dimes." I could still picture it clear as day.
And the Halifax Herald, I think Bruce Garriock, and he came to Halifax.
Garriock replaced me. Okay. So what happened was the Herald was a weekly. And I was hanging around. You were, like I said, you were my first story. I did others, and I was hanging around, and there was rumors that there was going to be a daily. But in the meantime, a friend of mine who owned a bar on Wellington Street bought another bar right down the road from St. Pius, where I went to high school. And he came to me and he said, "Look, I want to change this thing into a sports bar, and I want you to run it for me." I went, "Hey, man, I'm in. I'm mid-20s, and you want me to run a sports bar?" And I said, we went back and forth on names. He said, finally we settled on, well, I said, why sports? Let's just go hardcore hockey. I mean, that's what I'm all about. Let's just blow the doors off it, go hardcore hockey. He said, well, what are you thinking? I said, let's call it the Original Six. So he said, okay. So we called it the Original Six. Well, after 3 months, I bought in. I became a partner. Well, at that time, the Herald, lo and behold, became a daily, became the Ottawa Sun. Yes. So when I gave my resignation, the guy who replaced me got hired in my spot, Bruce Garriock.
Wow. He came to Halifax and did a big full 2-page article. I think it was on the front page of the newspaper and on the front page of the sports. And my first year, just a couple of years later, my first year at St. Mary's in '87. So Bruce Garriock, who, just replaced you eventually. So that's pretty cool
He
story.
replaced me. He came on board, I think, as a copy editor originally. And then when I left, he started writing. And I don't know, it was literally specifically my position per se, but there was definitely, that was the checkerboard. I went out, he came up. And I got in the bar business, but I still everything. I was doing a lot of radio and TV by that time. I was doing a ton of radio, and I was traveling around. In those days, I'd go through the hockey news, and I was running a little ad saying, "I'm the expert of the world. So whoever wants to get it on, let me know." There's no emails, no cell phones or nothing. So you had to go by addresses, write a letter. I'd get a letter. I'd get on a bus and head out of town and go to these towns where these guys were, hammer everybody, and then drink all weekend and go home.
Well, Paul's going to ask you a few questions about that. I just want to finish one last thing about your visit to our school. And that's one of your followers mentioned something about Darcy McGee. And I just want to say, in all the years of playing football, my greatest rivalry that I ever played in was literally in my first years of high school was Darcy McGee. And the reason they were such a great rival was, well, three reasons. We were the two best teams in that region. We were the two only English schools in that region of Quebec.
Right.
And we were crosstown rivals. It was kind of like Paul, it was like Dalhousie, St. Mary's, although I wish Dal had a football team when I played, but it was such an intense rivalry. We were fortunate to beat them during my years there, but we had a few playoff games we won on the last play of the game. Like, we could have lost a few times to them, but that was an amazing rivalry. And I just wanted to mention that quick because I know one of your followers got into a little discussion with you there about
Colin Clark. He ended up coming. I think he transferred over to Pius and ended up playing. Right. And I'm a Pius alumni, and I never would have had in the '70s. Chris, our high school team was a mini CFL team.
Yes,
it was ridiculous because we had every Catholic boy. We had every Catholic boy in the city. That was the only. If you were a Catholic and you wanted Catholic education as a male in the 1970s, you had to go to St. Pius. And so you can imagine the athletes that they had to pick from at that time. And there was just the football team was, and we didn't have a hockey team, unfortunately. It came much after I graduated high school. So, but those are great times. I cherish my own personal memories. I'm older than Steve and yourself by a few years, but not a ton, but a few. But we're in the same snack bracket in terms of the era we grew up in. And I cherish those days very, very much, both obviously through the NHL, but I mean, just as a person growing up where I did, when I did, and with who I did. And I cherish all the sports I played and all the friends I made. It was the greatest of times.
And Liam, did you get the bug early in life to transition into what you became in life? Because you don't become a historian, an author, a trivia expert, if I could use that terminology to describe you, at the age of 19. That happens organically. Yeah. When did that track sort of start with you? When were you on the pathway to being the version of Liam Maguire that we know through the prism of hockey history and sports history?
Like all Canadian kids, started, played the sport from as soon as Dad would let me put on skates and equipment. And I collected the hockey cards, as we all did. Yeah. On the back of the cards, you had your favorite teams and players' statistics. And the cards in those days always had those really cool little anecdotes. And me and my friends, we would memorize them. And then the next level from that was I had this friend, and I've written his name in several of my books. And he's still alive. He's a dear friend. We're the same age. I've known him since 1968. His name's Phil Byrne. And elementary school and high school friend. And we used to ride the bus together. I'd get on the bus with him on a Monday morning, and he would ask me who was leading every team in scoring. And he knew, and I didn't. I wouldn't be able to get them all. He knew them all. And that pissed me off. And so I had to say, I gotta at least be even with this guy, which I eventually was as the school year would go along. But the defining moment, Paul, to be perfectly honest with you, because there was a singular defining moment. And it was in 1975 at an exhibition game here in Ottawa. In those days, the Ottawa Civic Centre, home of the Ottawa 67s, would host NHL teams for a period of time for their training camps. It could be any teams, could be St. Louis, could be Chicago, could be Boston, could be teams who'd come up for a week and they'd train here and they'd play exhibition games here. And the Blackhawks were training here and they were playing the Canadians. And I went from St. Pius. I was in grade 11 with 5 friends, and to watch the game, see if my favorite player of all time, Yvon Cornway, was going to be in the lineup. The only way you could get a lineup, you had to buy the media guide. It was a little bit of a scam they were running. And the media guide cost $2. And it had a program, a lineup in it. So we all bought media guides. And I took it home that night, watched the game, took it home that night. I was reading through it. And like names like Toe Blake and Dickie Moore. And I went, I don't even know who these guys are. Like, they're on my favorite team. I'm a Hab fan. And like Dickie Moore is a 2-time Art Ross scoring champion, 58 and 59. And Toe Blake won the Lady Byng in 46. I'm going, I don't even know this. And I call myself a fan. So I read that book cover to cover that night. The next day, at the lunch table, we had a little impromptu contest. I swear to God, this was nothing, but it was 6 of us. A few others joined in. We had a little contest, and I nailed it. I said, ask me anything that's in that book. And they did. And I got it all. And word spread like wildfire. I was just an innocuous, skinny little runt from the Cars Road at that time, who the only really thing I was probably known for was being a good skater athletically. And I was good in gym, but nothing, no reason to anybody. They would trample me in the hallways. I was nothing. And all of a sudden I got this rep, and it just spread like wildfire. And I remember this kid. He was a year behind me. He was in my brother Mike's class. His name was Gord Malatic. He had a cousin visiting from the United States, and they stopped me in the hallway. This is about 6 weeks later. Now I'm getting this rep. Everywhere I'm going, there's a guy. There's a guy who knows all the hockey. There's a guy who knows all the hockey. I'm 15 years old. And Gord stopped me in the portables at St. Pius, 1975-76, November 75. And he said, who won the Stanley Cup in 1933? And I went, man, I don't know. I know it was an American team, but I don't know who it was. And they went, see, he knew it was an American team. And again, another epiphany. I went home that night and I said, how can I be this expert everybody says I am if I don't know who won the cup every year? So I memorized them all that night. And the next morning I went, and I used to carry the NHL guide and record book. In those days, it was a little pocketbook size thing, not what it later became, and now it's all online. Back then it was pocketbook, but it was thick. But I would carry it with me every class, and I would tell the kids, whoever was sitting behind me, we had like 2 minutes before you started teaching at Pius. And so I had 2 minutes. I'd say, ask me anything. And they would go through and they would ask me anything. I'd bing, 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 bing. And it just took off from there. And then I took a hockey sweater, Montreal Canadian hockey sweater, and I had silk screened on the back, NHL trivia expert. I'd go into the bars and I would take my jacket off. And I would face all the older guys, or I'd put my back to all the older guys. And eventually somebody would go into the washroom and they'd go by, hey kid, what's with the shirt? And I'd say, well, I'm the expert of the world. Do you guys want to try me? It's a wager. What's the game, kid? It's a buck a question or a pint a question, either or. And I'd take questions. And then sure enough, it led me going on radio in 1981 on CFRA. They heard about me. I phoned in. They asked me to come in studio. They paid me. And things just really accelerated from there. But that's kind of the cold note version of how it went down.
That's amazing.
It's interesting. Liam, I wouldn't compare my knowledge to yours, but as you were telling that story to us, I can tell you every baseball World Series winner going back to 1904. I was telling Chris today, and I'm coming to a point. I'm not going to say this to compliment myself, but I want to come to a point on this. I'm a big Brooklyn Dodgers fan in history. Starting in 1941, their breakthrough year, from 1941 to their final season in 1957, I can give you the starting lineup on opening day all those years for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I can give you the starting lineup for the 1964 Cardinals and 1967 Cardinals, two of the best baseball teams of all time. The point I'm coming to is I don't recall memorizing that, but the passion project sort of burns onto my brain. Do you have any thoughts on the way our brains work? Because I got some of the juice that you have going on here. You have it more than I do. But a lot of the smart people out there can't do that. Do you have any theories as to why our brains, and your brain especially, works this way?
Well, I think obviously yours does as well. And first of all, I think they're, without trying to be pretentious here or anything, there's a modicum level of intellect for sure that's that needs to be exercised for anybody to regurgitate that type of information. In my case, I didn't have to sit down and read it like I was studying for an exam for hours, which I later used. I use what I call the umbrella technique. At least what I do now is when I do my shows, and they're specifically hockey history shows or trivia shows, I ask people to give me something that I can work off of. Give me a name, give me a year, give me a team, or give me something from what you know or you would have heard from your parents or grandparents on the world of hockey, specifically the NHL. But I go back to 1893, first time the Stanley Cup was awarded to the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association. So they give me something that then becomes the top of my umbrella.
Yeah.
So if it's a year, like for you, Brooklyn in 41, well, if someone specifically went to that year, or the Cardinals in 64 or what have you, to me, saying this to you, Paul, I would say that then is the top of your umbrella. From there, you're given the starting lineup. Now the umbrella has now come out a little bit. If you picture an umbrella, it comes out, right? So you're adding information under each thing, but somewhere ultimately was the start. Could be a batting champion, could be a Cy Young winner, could be whatever, could be any number of different things. But I think the strength of what I do, I build under the umbrella in a story-like fashion, and I can stand on stage in front of countless hundreds of people, and I'd like to think entertain them and take people's questions, or just give me something I can feed off of, and I will take the ball and run with it. I think our minds, and we all know this, we've heard this for the last number of decades since minds have been examined and medical procedures have increased to where people are still saying we barely use any percentage of what is available in our mind. And I know myself, if I want to remember a number, let's say a license plate number, let's say it's NND 792. That's the license plate number of a girl I dated in 1979. I still know her license plate number. I remember the phone number of the girl I dated in college in 1981. I still remember her phone number. I just remembered it, and I said, I'm just going to remember this for all time. Boom, it's in there. I once did a radio show in London at the university there, and was it Fanshawe College or was it Western? No, it was Western University, and they sent over a professor. I was on CFPL radio, and he gauged my answers for quickness and accuracy and detail. And the project was to decide how much of a photographic memory I actually had. And at the end of the show, the host said to him, so what do you think about Liam Maguire here? And he said, I had an 87% photographic memory. And I said, well, how can you have a percentage? You either have one or you don't. Like, you either can read a page and memorize it or you can't. He said, no. What that means, Liam, is that if there were 100 facts on that page and you read it and you wanted to remember it, you would on average remember 87 of them. That's what we deem your percentage of memory to be. Now, this was years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would fly today in 2023, Paul, but clearly you have some of the same. And I know there's many baseball aficionados, obviously, in the States. And I've come across some other guys who are really good in hockey, but like Jerry Roche on Three Rivers and Bob Duff down in Windsor. And, there were a couple of guys in Ottawa back in the day, as I said, when I started. But my first 10 or 15 years of this, I was like Mike Tyson, man. I didn't want anybody even in the same area code as me. I went hundreds of miles to take people on one-on-one. I put up my own money, went my own expense, and I put up whatever they wanted to bet. I said, I'm coming by myself. You can float this thing with as many friends as you want. I'm going to hammer you, and I'm going to hammer every one of them. So let's get it on. Because nobody's beat me. No one's sitting down across the table from me and beat me one-on-one. Absolutely not going to happen while I'm drawing a breath.
Well, you obviously had a very competitive spirit to you as well. And to remember that kind of stuff, what helps you to remember is when you have a genuine interest and a genuine passion for it too. I'm not at the level of you guys, but I can remember past Stanley Cup winners, friggin' right to the Toronto Maple Leafs, 1967. People like, how do you know this, or why do you know this, Chris? I said, I don't try to know it. I just know it because it's stuff I'm interested in, or past Super Bowl winners. And what helped me, you mentioned the back of hockey cards. For me, it was like ESPN Classic Canada, when all the series came on. When COVID hit, they were showing all the old series from the 80s and the Islanders and the Oilers. And oh my God, I loved it. Even they were showing it on regular TSN. So for me, it's easy to remember, or not even trying to memorize, but you just memorize it because you have such an interest and passion for it. Plus,
and you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. Plus,
that's such a huge part of it. I think for me going forward, that was a big part of it. I absolutely love it. I mean, you think about it. I sat in the control room with Ward Cornell in 1981 at Maple Leaf Gardens. I started doing radio with Dick Irvin in 83. He had me on a national radio broadcast over 50 times, Montreal Canadiens, NHL. I've been on Hockey Night in Canada. I started doing Dick's TV show in 1984. I was on 14 times in 7 years. And he would prepare a list of 50 questions, Dick Irvin, and fire them at me nonstop, like machine gun. I had no time to think. You either knew the answer or you didn't. And I would routinely get about 42 or 43. I'd miss about 7 out of 50.
That's amazing.
Questions
Under pressure too.
Irvin. It was so much fun though, but I love it. I love the history of it. Like the Montreal Forum was my home. It became my second home. But I love watching junior hockey. I played full contact till I was 24, and I played the men's leagues for 25 years after that. I still skate. I just don't play in leagues anymore. I don't need some guy hacking me at 11 o'clock at night because he thinks there's a scout in the stands, So I got out of that. But I coached my son for 13 years. I mean, I love the sport, and I love the history of it. We were joking. I don't know if we were on air or not. This is my second podcast tonight. I did one earlier, and I told the guys, because they're way younger than me, and they're way younger than you guys too. And they were talking about the 70s because they weren't born. They weren't alive. And I was telling them, I said, I wish Hockey Night in Canada, I wish the national broadcasters would just siphon off 5 minutes. You don't have to do 30 minutes. You should have every week, you should have a little segment with some visuals, some video if applicable, 2 or 3. Paul, you know this from broadcasting. You want to, the old rule, 3, 3, 3. You have your 3 things. Have your 3 things, whatever it be, the 3 keynote things about the guy. Have some visuals, have some video if applicable, and then you roll it out there with passion and with knowledge, and it's a nice short, punchy hit, and it's there. And believe me, people would be talking about it within weeks. They would be talking about it, and they'd say, "Hey, I wonder what it is tonight. I wonder who they're talking about tonight." And you don't have to go back to 1893. I mean, look at the guys we've lost. And yeah, there's so much out there and available online. I get that. You can go on your phones and see just about everything. But if you have it presented in a way, you got to trust me when I say this. There's so much about so many guys in the Hall of Fame that people don't know. And they could go online and they could read it, but it's not being presented in a way that would be the most informative and entertaining for them. And that's why I think I still get hired. And I still do, 50, 60, 70 appearances a year and all across Canada. And it's because people want that level of entertainment that they know I can provide. God willing, I can still. I hope I can, and I try to. And I think it is entertaining. And I wish our national broadcaster would do that for the entire populace of this fantastic country of ours.
And you feel free to disagree with this, or you may want to build on what I'm going to say. And this touches on Chris as well. Chris's sports experiences brought him into our communities. My appreciation of knowledge for sports allowed me to make friendships, develop self-esteem, allow me to learn how to be a professional, how to interact with people, how to fail or succeed in a public way. Yeah. Would you agree that what started as memorizing the backs of hockey cards actually allows you to survive in a boardroom, allows you to survive in a professional setting, allows you how to make better relationships with your friends and family members? These are skills that are applicable to other aspects of our life.
It definitely, in my case, it took it and expanded it to the level that it was at. I was one of those kids. I don't know why. My late father was born and raised in Dublin, Ireland. I think I've got some of that in me. My mother is a French Canadian from a little village north of Quebec City. Both of them extremely smart people. My mom's family is known for their memory. My dad's family is known for his passion. And they can put those two
Good
together.
combination.
It culminated with me where even at an early age, in grade 1 and in grade 2, I won a public speaking contest. I maybe had a little bit of a leg up because it came to me naturally, but doing what I did and as it grew, it no question gave me an opportunity to step in front of a boardroom wearing a 3-piece suit and in front of a room of non-hockey fans and go in and entertain them to the point where they can't wait to bring me back. Just because I was the distraction while they're going through all their multi-million-dollar business deals, they needed, hey, we're here for a week. What are we going to do? I know a guy. And I get brought in. And I come in there and, a little bit rough around the edges, but, looking clean at least, hopefully. And and then just rip the tar right off it. And it's, if you got to have the swagger and the confidence, right? Because you're going to get eaten alive if you don't. So I have forever in my life been the gunslinger.
I got to ask you, Paul. So you've been on the air too for all those years. How were you, Paul, at least in the early years when that red light would come on for you? Was that something? Because you two have a lot in common. And Paul's humble, but he knows his sports trivia amazingly too. But what was it like for you, Paul, the first few years in front of the red light?
I was a little nervous, but not afraid, if that makes sense. Like butterflies to keep yourself a heightened level of anxiety to respect the process. I wasn't nervous or insecure about it. I wouldn't say I was. My biggest problem is that when I did start out, I was good enough to be on TV, but I had a lot of improving to do. And I had to do it in my home community. My mother, my father, my siblings, my teachers, my friends, their parents, people in the community who looked out for me, who were cheering for me, were watching me do my job in a very public way. And I found that hard. In a different universe, I maybe would have gone off to a different TV market and honed my skills in a more private setting away from my community, because I knew everyone in the city before I was on TV, it seemed. And so I felt growing up on TV in my home market to be a bit of a struggle. All that being said, my people here cheered for me and it filled me up with something special. And they actually, in hindsight, carried me along the way. But it was exhausting to, let's face it, sometimes you suck. Sometimes you're not as good as you want to be. And sometimes when you're starting out, you have a bad day on camera where you could be a little bit better. When everyone who loves and cares for you is watching you on TV, it makes it sometimes that much worse. So those were hard times, but I think the longer version of the story is I was very lucky to grow up in my home community and do it because I had a lot of support systems around me. So Liam, we want to get you, before we wrap this up, we're not about to wrap it up, but we'll start to we're rounding third, we're heading for home. All right.
There you go. I got you.
We're going to talk about the Ottawa Senators briefly, the Toronto Maple Leafs briefly, the Montreal Canadiens briefly, and the Philadelphia Flyers briefly, because Chris Flynn is a Philadelphia Flyers fan. So Chris, I'll start with you, Chris. You can ask Liam about your Flyers and how they think this rebuild's going to go. Go ahead, Chris. Take it to the Flyers first.
Yeah. I won't go back into my history on how I became a Flyers fan.
I watched it today, buddy.
Did you? Okay, yeah. So long suffering Flyers fan, and I don't want to go in too much detail on it because we've talked about it with a few other guests about this year they're not making the playoffs again, and it's been a few years since they've been out of the playoffs. And just wanted to give your quick thoughts on the Flyers this year, and also the Senators too. I think they've lost 3 of their last 4 games possibly, but it's not looking good for them. But just the Flyers and the Senators, just a quick thoughts. More on the Senators actually, because they still got a chance, but just a quick thought on those 2 teams.
Yeah, sure. Sens lost 4 out of 5, and they had just reeled off a pile of wins in a row. They went on that road trip and were embarrassed in Chicago, came back with a big win in Seattle, and then just even though they didn't look particularly good against Vancouver and Calgary, they had a hell of a third period last night against Edmonton, probably deserved a better fate, minimally a point, and maybe with any luck could have stole that game. But regardless, they lost it. So the only good fortune they had was everybody else that they're competing against lost last night as well. And so they kind of sort of hovered around still in that long shot to get into that final wild card spot. But I see the Sabres, last I checked, were beating Washington tonight. So that's not good for Ottawa. But I mean, the Sens have a nucleus of talent there, minus Josh Norris, who was hurt early. Right now, Shabbat's out, and there's some stuff needs to be worked out with him on his game, but I believe they will get that straightened out. But their nucleus of talent is probably on par with just about anybody in the league in terms of a nucleus. 4 to 5 guys, 6 guys, whatnot. They don't have all the pieces to be a cup contender, but they are certainly on the right track. And the changes that'll be made in the next 12 to 24 months will be very, very interesting. I do believe they're going to be a serious cup threat within 2 years. As to whether they win or not, I don't know. But I do believe they're going in the right direction, albeit it may happen with different personnel off the ice in terms of coaching and general manager and whatnot. And we've got all sorts of things. There's going to be new owners, lots happening, maybe a rink move downtown and all this stuff. But Ottawa are very, very close, I think, to being a real serious threat. Your Philadelphia Flyers, coming from, they go to the finals there. I heard you say it when you had Pierre Maguire on. I watched it today. You sent me the link, and you were talking about the trip in 2010, and and they've kind of sputtered right since then. And whether it be goaltending. I mean, look, this year, look, the Canadians are the number one team in terms of man game loss or injuries. Flyers are right in behind them. They're only marginally in behind them. They've lost anybody and everybody. Like Sean Couturier is probably one of the best two-way centers in the entire NHL. Like, you take that guy out. Travis Konechny would be the heart and soul. He could play on any other team in the league. Any other team that guy could play on. Like, you look at how their D has been decimated. I don't know if Tortorella is the right guy or not. I mean, sometimes guys get a tremendously long rope because they win that Stanley Cup, right? I mean, he gets that cup. He starts as an assistant coach in Buffalo. He moves around. He comes to Tampa. Give him credit. He took the C off Vinny Lecavalier. He had no captain for a year. They bring in Dave Anderchuk. He gives him the C. He gets Vinny flying right. He straightens everybody else out. Brad Richards turns around, loves the guy, wins a Conn Smythe. They have one of the best Stanley Cup finals in the 2000s, beating Calgary, sadly. It's pulling for the Canadian city. Anyway, it was a great final. Great fight with Lecavalier and Iginla. And all of a sudden, Tortorella now can do no wrong because he's got a Stanley Cup on the resume. It doesn't work that way, but those guys get that latitude. And he's got that now in Philly. I think it's a better fit for him than it was in Vancouver. I don't know about Columbus, some of the other spots, but I don't know that he's the guy, Chris, to take the Flyers to that next level. First thing I want to see, just give me a healthy lineup next year. You're going to have a top pick this year, top 5, but who knows? Could get lucky. And, even to get Fantilli, it's not like you're taking a massive second fiddle. I mean, maybe to Bedard, but we don't know. Anyway, Flyers are a project, and I know you're disappointed because you're a young man when those 74-5 teams won, and they've been competitive every decade since, with the exception of just this last 10 years.
Yep.
But they're sucking right now. I can tell you, I was just in Philly. I spent 4 days there. I get hired every year by the Flyer alumni. They are one of the strongest alumni in the league, and I've worked for them all. And I would put them, maybe not with the Habs. They're probably number 1. Detroit, Toronto have done a good job. And there's some of the others. The Flyers would be right there, right at that next level. Brad Marsh is president of the alumni now, does an unbelievable job. And I just emceed an event for them down there a week ago Friday. And man, the turnout they get down there is just incredible. And it's they've got a strong nucleus in terms of ownership in behind, notwithstanding what just happened with Briere's son. I think that was a good move to get Daniel in there to replace Chuck Fletcher. I think that's a great move. You got a guy who's a player. Not that you need that by no means, but he's a Flyer. He's got that imprinted on him. I know he played for other teams. I know he came to the Coyotes, but the guy, once you're a Flyer, man, believe me, I'm telling you, work for that alumni. These guys all played for other teams. Every one of them, almost to a man, all played for other teams. And yet they gravitate back to this organization. That says something to me about an infrastructure that still exists and still can exist. They're still filling that building. I went to the game. They played the Rangers. There was a ton of Ranger fans there. But, I mean, fact is, they're still filling that building. And this team's obviously not going anywhere this year and hasn't been for weeks. So there's my thoughts on the Flyers and the Sens. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's how I see it.
That's fair. And Montreal Canadiens, before we get to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, I said to Dave Poulin last week, from the prism of history, weird team. 19 months ago, they're in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
I'll let a fluky run, but they sacrificed no assets to get to that cup final. So much so, they finished 32nd the next year. They have multiple first-round picks. Now, if you look at it on the back end, Barron, Gouli, Kovacevic, Jack-Eye, Harris. They signed Jaden Struble this week. They have Lane Hudson playing NCAA. They have Logan Mailloux coming up, who's having a great year for the London Knights. They have Doc. They have they're hurt. Obviously, Doc's hurt. Caulfield's hurt, but Suzuki as well. They have other younger prospects coming up. I see Riley Kidney's tearing up the queue this year. The point I'm coming to, all of a sudden, they're prospect rich. There's not an Austin Matthews on that list, but there's a lot of B-plus prospects. How do you see this rebuild going? I would submit to you that it's probably going a bit better than they thought it would, say, a year ago. Would you agree with that? And what would be the length of the racetrack of a rebuild like this?
I think, barring anything unforeseen, they're going to miss the playoffs again next year as well. But I'm liking the progression. You know, as you said, 32nd last year, should be somewhere around 26th, 27th this year, should be somewhere around 20th, 21st overall next year. I think they'll come up another 5 spots. I think they'll be sort of in this discussion, kind of where Ottawa is right now come this time of year. I expect them to be 6 or 8 points out of a playoff spot next year. It's a fairly sizable jump from where they are currently. And I'm basing a lot of that on hopefully their core staying healthy. Number one, got 12 guys. I mean, it's basically Laval, you know, it's on steroids here.
And they can't stay healthy. It's remarkable to me. Even I see Christian Dvorak is out now with a knee injury for the rest of the year. This team is snake bitten by injuries.
Crazy.
It's one of the most bizarre things I've seen.
It is. It does remind me of about 15 years ago where they went through the same thing. And I don't know if you recall or not, but they ended up dismissing almost all of their training staff at that time. That was right sort of actually a little bit more than 15 years. It was kind of when Bob Gainey came in 2008. They were as good a team as there was next to Detroit in the NHL, as far as I'm concerned. They were on the right track. And they were on the right track as well when Mark Bergevin took over. And they went to the semifinals in 2014, and Kreider ran Carey Price in game 1. We'll never know if that could have been the year, because the Rangers went to the final and lost in 5 games, and 3 of them were in overtime. So, you know, could Montreal have got there had Carey Price stayed healthy? I think they could have. And that may have been, in fact, the best year that Carey had until that aborted sort of run in 2021 that happened because of the unusual circumstances. But then, as you just said, you still got to win 3 rounds to get there, which they did. You come back 3-1 against Toronto, you sweep Winnipeg, you lose game 1 to Vegas, and you come back and win that series, and everybody and their brother thought you're going to get smoked there, notwithstanding what you'd just done in the previous 2. So I like where they're going. You said all the names. You'd have to be the most ardent hater on the planet to not say minimally that they're going in the right direction in terms of prospects. They've got 2 guys nominated in the Hobey Baker top 10, including Hudson. He'll probably finish second to Fantilli, and Caulfield's a real deal, clearly. And I'm just so excited about the future. I converse with my son about this all the time, and I tell him, I say, Rory, it's the most excited I've been about Montreal Canadiens rookies since the early 80s.
Before we jump to Toronto, you talk about the 2021 run. Look, I have a lot of friends in the Toronto media. These are my buddies, but a lot of them tag every report or broadcast. When the Leafs, by fluke, lost to Montreal, they had a 3-1 lead.
Yep.
The Deneau line shut down the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner line. The Corey Perry, Eric Stahl, and Joel Armia line basically took over the series the last 2 or 3 games. They were a very effective line. That might have been a fluke, but then they swept the Jets, and then they beat the Vegas Golden Knights in 6 games. That was just a good run. They played very well from the net out, and I don't think they get enough credit for it. And of course, when you finish 32nd the next year, nobody's talking about what you did the year before. So it goes into the books as a bit of a blip in history.
Absolutely, and it'll probably let's face it. There's not a lot of gray area when you're talking about Montreal and Toronto, right?
Yeah, right.
They're either loved or they're hated, and the group that hates them are pretty vocal about it, and they're going to dismiss that run for sure. It is what it is. Somebody had to get in. They got in. Toronto's up 3-1. You know, you look at what happened. Corey Perry hits Johnny T. They still had more than enough ammo. Should have won the series. Scheifele blows a cannon on Evans in game 1, and Winnipeg imploded after that. I mean, they literally imploded because Scheifele lost his mind, got suspended. And then Vegas, I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, the gaff in game 2, the Josh Anderson.
Gotta make a save. That puck can't go in the net. That can't go.
That puck absolutely cannot go in at that time. It just can't happen. Yet, as you know, Paul, I'm sure I don't know, certainly don't have any idea about baseball like you do, but I can speak to hockey, and I can tell you, if I took a pen and paper, the 3 of us were sitting down, and we had a case of beer and some pizza, and we were sitting down, and just for fun, I started writing instances down that either I've witnessed or know of firsthand since I've been alive, let alone going back to when I was born, to how many times. Look, the Montreal Canadiens lost the Stanley Cup in Game 7 in overtime in 1954 because Doug Harvey reached up with his hand to grab a puck that had been shot in by Tony Leswick on a line change. And it hit the top of his glove and rolled over Jerry McNeil's shoulder. And the Habs lost the cup. Like, the amount of instances that you've had something crazy or one-off that have happened in a Stanley Cup final, let alone all the way back to the first round, is just, it's amazing how many there would be in hockey history. And this would going way back. There's so many. So it's what makes the history of it, and just the toughness of that trophy to win 4 rounds now. Every round's been a best of 7 since 1987, with the exception of what we did during COVID. And otherwise, you go back 87 every round. 4 rounds, best of 7s. And in those days, you were playing every second night. And it was just, and it mostly is still now, but it's just an incredibly tough trophy to win. And it's a war of attrition out there. Even in this time period where it's not as physical as it used to be, it still is physical, but it's just a war of attrition. And you look at so many injuries that have been key components, and you've got to find a way to rally around it. I mean, the Penguins won a cup with no Chris Letang. I mean, how many could you go down the line and talk about that, right? So there's been many, many, many. So, that's what I say all the time. Mario Lemieux won 2 Stanley Cups. Bobby Orr won 2 Stanley Cups. Bobby Hull won 1 Stanley Cup. Stan Mikita, Bobby Hull, 1 Stanley Cup. I mean, Brad Park never won. Daryl Sittler, Gilbert Perreault, Dean Prentice. These guys, play at Bill Gadsby, never won Stanley Cup. These guys played 22, 3, 4, 5 years, never won a cup. All-Star, Hall of Famers, never won a cup.
No, it's true. And let's wrap it up with the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're taping this on Wednesday night. They just lost 2-1 to the Avalanche in a shootout. Speaking on this Wednesday night, are they the team that can get to the second round this year? And as you get ready to answer that question, I will submit to you, Liam, that early indications, my opinion, I might be wrong, all those trades they made a couple of weeks ago, they don't look any harder to play against at this stage. And I'm talking that grit, grind, playoff style hockey. I'm not seeing it down the stretch yet, but to give them credit, they have a load of skill.
Well, I think they're certainly hoping that Luke Schenn in the back 9 of his career here is going to be able to provide some of that, being platooned in and out of the lineup if he's healthy, more so than they would say a Wayne Simmons, who I think is really risky to put in, given the level of play that he can provide right now against the Tampa Bay. I do feel right now, if the series started tonight, now mind you, Ryan O'Reilly's out, but he's going to be back. But if he's in the lineup, I do feel if the series started tonight and the Leafs have home ice advantage, I think this is the year. I think they beat Tampa. I really do. I know this Tampa team Vasilevsky and Hedman have had terrible seasons. The only guy who's really is having a career year is Braden Point. Everybody else has regressed. Steve Stamkos kind of, parallel to last season, but from his heyday, certainly from his 60-goal season, he's not that. But, and he's banged up a little bit too. But Tampa's played 70 playoff games in the last 3 years, as we all know. 3 finals, 2 cups. Eventually, every dog has their day. Eventually, Toronto is going to win again, a series. They're not going to go winless for the rest of our lives. And I think this is the year, if the series was to start right now, all things being relative, I'm saying with Ryan O'Reilly in the lineup, relative health to both teams. Toronto home ice. I hear what you're saying, Paul, but I think they're hoping, the Leafs are, and their fans, that Luke Schenn can offset some of that, because it can't just be Bunting, Kerfoot. They got nobody else. And this is the problem, what Tampa's going to do, because he's still got Corey Perry. He's still got the guys there. But Tampa never really replaced, the Goudreau line. They never really did. Gord, Goudreau. They never really, in my view. Nick Paul's had a good season, and he's a nice plug-in. I don't think they have the same depth. I think they're worn out. I think they're going to start to come down a little bit, and I think they're susceptible to getting beat. And I think Toronto's core offensively, notwithstanding tonight, I didn't see the game, but watch it all later. But I do think this is the year that Toronto wins a series.
I would say, based on the law of averages, it's got to happen sooner or later. So it might as well be this year. Now, facing Boston in the second round could be a whole different ball of wax. I'll also add this: if they don't win a series this year, and this is a separate podcast subject for another time. If they don't, they are 4 playoff losses away from this being a failed rebuild. And I'm speaking in that stark terms because that team will look demonstrably different probably by next September if they don't win.
I sat beside Brendan Shanahan. I'll tell you, the Leafs did a hell of a thing. He did, almost primarily him. On September 28th, they honored Team Canada 72. That's the actual anniversary of the Henderson goal. And I was in Toronto all day with the guys. I'm very, very close with all of them, especially, Paul Henderson. He's just a very special friend. So is Yvon Cornway and Phil Esposito, Serge Savard. They all are. But Brendan Shanahan brought the team in, as many guys as they could get. And they had a series of events during the day. And that night at the Royal York Hotel, he arranged for a private room for the guys to come back and their wives. And I ended up sitting beside Brendan, and we're talking about the season and everything. And then he was talking like in the present tense, about this season, this and that, everything else. And somebody asked a question on the far side of the table. Dennis Hull was over there and a couple others. And somebody asked a question about next year or something. He says, well, I may not be here next year. Like he was already saying it in September that he knows. Yeah. And I think Kyle Dubas knows. This is it, baby. The Shanna plan, I nicknamed Dubas the calculator. Everything here, they got to get out of this first round. I mean, this is a team that their fans and everybody's been talking about maybe taking a run at the Stanley Cup. You can't even get out of the first round. You want to say you're facing Tampa and Boston. You lost to Montreal with a 3-1 lead, and you lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So give me a break. You reap what you sow. And they've been a colossal disappointment. They have been, in fact, you could do a sports book just on the creativity of the nature of how the Leafs have blown it in the playoffs since '67, let alone since 2004. So it's you kind of feel for them, and then you kind of don't, because a lot of their fans kind of ruin it, But at the same time, I do think they're going to win around this year.
And, we were just talking about Ottawa and Montreal. So Austin Matthews came into the league back in the 2017 season. That was the year Ottawa, I believe, made it to the conference final, losing in 7th game to Pittsburgh. And Montreal beat Pittsburgh in the play-in round, and then it went to the Cup final. So in the Austin Matthews era, which is the mediocre era, arguably, for Montreal and Ottawa, Montreal has won four playoff series in the Austin Matthews era, and Ottawa has won, I think, 3. So it's kind of funny on the comparables. Like, this is supposed to be a terrific era for Toronto, but they can't get past that hump. Although I do agree, it's not a sustainable trend. They have to break through at some point. So am I predicting they're going to win this year? No, I'll believe it when I see it. But I agree with you that if not now, when? They got to break through for sure from a history standpoint. Well, listen, Liam, we're going to wrap it up there because I get the impression the three of us could talk all night. And Chris, I know as we say goodbye, you were excited to talk to Liam because it was a throwback to your earlier football days and one of those first journalistic exposures you had through our friend Liam Maguire.
Oh, just an amazing connection. Like Liam said, we just connected just a few days ago through Steve, and you reminded me of doing that article 39 years ago, or get it next fall, be 40 years ago, which is crazy. Your first article and doing it.
First paid article ever, man. And they sent me to Hull to do you and film and write. And to be talking to you right now, especially what you went on to do, Chris. Anybody can go online and see what you did, and the life-saving thing that you did as well, and let alone what you did athletically. And I followed you after as well. It wasn't like you just fell off the turnip truck after I left the film and write that day. I mean, I knew what you were doing at St. Mary's, and I watched some of those games when they were on TSN as well. I just had no idea. I didn't know the McLaughlins. I knew Steve back then, but I only superficially. And I didn't really get to know him until a few years later. And then I didn't know, obviously, about Troy and you and all that. So one day, buddy, we're watching this, I'm seeing you at that bar right now. I'm going to be in there, and we're gonna snap a cap, and we're gonna have a chat and talk some more sports stuff. And I'm looking forward to that.
I'll mention their parents, Dwight and Colleen. You'll love Dwight too. And yes, we'll all and they're all great athletes, all the McLaughlins and all their cousins, all the gang back.
Oh yeah.
There. So
yeah, look at Daly McLaughlin.
Yes,
I mean,
Daly,
Gilbert. These guys are all very, very good athletes, and I know that whole where you grew up, the Buckingham area, up the line there, Low and Venasta, and those areas there are so rich. Letting you come into the Pontiac with Quillon and obviously Shawville and those towns, and I mean, it's just a hotbed of sports. And just the salt of the earth people. I love it. I love that area as much as I love the rurals in the valley. I tell you, there's very, very, very many similarities to all of those that are so different, even still in 2023, than the city core of Ottawa. And Ottawa is really just a big town. If you got any length of time here and you played any sports here, you are 2 degrees of separation. Absolutely, at the most.
And that outdoor league they had up there up the line, like with
Sports Illustrated did the story, right?
And that was incredible. All their games were in all outdoor rinks throughout the whole winter. You don't really see that
outdoor
anymore.
full contact
with fighting, senior league fighting. It was all great players. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys. We are going to wrap it up there because we'll be doing this until Thursday morning. So Liam Maguire. Very flattered and grateful you took time for us, and very appreciative and respectful of your career and your contributions to history and hockey history in this country. It's a pleasure to see you virtually, and a real pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Well, it'd be an honor for me someday, Bud, to shake your hand and have a pint with you as well. I really appreciate you and Chris having me on. It was a real honor and a pleasure, and God willing, our paths will cross face to face sometime, and we'll knock that beer back.
I look forward to that day. I look forward to that day indeed. That wraps up another edition of the Scramble podcast. For my podcast partner, Chris Flynn, I am Paul Hollingsworth. We thank Liam Maguire for joining us, and we will see you next time.